Aisha Thorne sat motionless in the dimly lit hotel room, the blue glow of her laptop screen the only real source of light. Outside the window, twilight had already swallowed most of the Oklahoma plains. The horizon was just a thin purple line between land and sky. She was somewhere on I-35, roughly halfway between Dallas and Oklahoma City, a nowhere place that felt strangely appropriate for the nowhere. Feeling that had settled in her chest over the past week. The business trip had started normally enough. 3 days ago, she had boarded the early flight from Atlanta with a leather portfolio, a neatly printed agenda, and the quiet confidence of someone who had done this routine dozens of times. Supplier negotiations in Dallas, contract signings the next morning, warehouse inspection in the afternoon. Then a long drive north to meet the regional distribution manager in Oklahoma. City, textbook, predictable, the kind of trip. Malcolm always waved off with a casual kiss on the forehead and the same tired joke. Don't fall in love with the road, babe. You've got a perfectly good husband waiting at home. Except lately that casual kiss felt rehearsed. The joke landed flatter each time. And the perfectly good husband had started carrying his phone into the bathroom, locking the screen even when he was just brushing his teeth. Aisha rubbed her temples and exhaled slowly. Maybe I'm losing it, she thought. Maybe I'm turning into one of those paranoid wives who reads too much into nothing. But even as the thought formed, another part of her, the quieter, more instinctive part, rejected it immediately. She had installed the security camera exactly 7 days ago, the evening before she left for this trip. It wasn't a grand surveillance system, just one small, discreet Wi-Fi camera disguised among the leaves of the high-maintenance Phalaenopsis orchids that sat on the kitchen island. The kind of orchids that demanded precise watering schedules, indirect light, and weekly orchid fertilizer, things Malcolm had solemnly promised to handle. I'll water them every 3 days. Cross my heart, he had said, pressing a hand to his chest like a Boy Scout. Aisha had laughed then. Now the memory felt barbed. She knew he wouldn't touch the flowers. He never had. The orchids were her thing, fragile, beautiful, demanding. Just like parts of herself she rarely showed at work. Malcolm preferred low maintenance, succulents that could survive a month of neglect, or better yet, no plants at all. So when she placed the order for the camera, she told herself it was insurance for the orchids, a way to gently remind him from 3 states away. But she wasn't fooling herself anymore. The unease had been growing for months. It started small. Longer hours at the architecture firm, even though projects were drying up. Sudden interest in personal privacy when his phone buzzed during dinner. The way he angled the screen away from her when texting. Then, 2 months ago, the message that flashed across. His lock screen while he was in the shower and the phone sat charging on the nightstand. Waiting for you. Same time, no name, just T. When she asked later, casually over coffee, he barely looked up from his tablet. Tanisha, new accountant at the firm. She's helping me sort out some tax stuff. He smiled, the easy, disarming smile that used to melt her reservations. This time it felt like plastic. Aisha hadn't pressed. She hated confrontation. Always had. Growing up, she was the peacemaker, the older sister who smoothed things over when Tasha threw tantrums or broke rules. Conflict made her stomach knot. So she watched, instead, quietly, methodically, like an engineer studying stress points in a structure before it collapsed. And the more she watched, the more cracks appeared. Malcolm's late nights became later. His explanations became vaguer. He stopped asking about her day the way he used to. Sex, when it happened at all, felt mechanical, like checking a box. And every time she tried to bring up the distance, he deflected with the same 2 sentences. Work's been brutal. You're reading too much into things, babe. So she bought the camera. Now sitting cross-legged on the stiff hotel bedspread, heart thudding uncomfortably, she opened the app. The feed took a few seconds to connect. A black square, a spinning icon. Then the image resolved. The kitchen, their kitchen. The round oak table where they had eaten breakfast together almost every morning for 5 years. The pendant light hanging low, casting warm circles on the granite counter. The orchids, still alive, miraculously, sitting exactly where she left them. And 3 people. Aisha's breath caught so sharply it hurt. Malcolm sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up. Posture relaxed in that way he only got when he felt completely in control. Next to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, was a woman in her early 30s. Dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail. Minimal makeup. A simple black top. Features so familiar they made Aisha's stomach lurch. Tasha. Not Tanisha the accountant. Tasha, her younger sister. The same Tasha who used to crawl into Aisha's bed during thunderstorms. The same Tasha she had tutored through high school algebra, co-signed a car loan for, helped get her first real job after college dropped out. The same Tasha who at family dinners always sat a little too close to Malcolm and laughed a little too long at his jokes. Across from them sat a third person, a man in his late 30s, light blue button-down, wire-rimmed glasses, a leather folder open in front of him, papers neatly arranged. He looked uncomfortable. His fingers kept adjusting the corner of one sheet over and over. Aisha fumbled to turn up the volume. The main thing is that everything is finalized before she returns, the man was saying. His voice was low, almost apologetic. I've made the changes to the Articles of Incorporation exactly as requested. All debt liability now falls directly on the CEO personally, which is her. Excellent, Mr. Vance, Malcolm's voice, calm, satisfied, almost cheerful. That means by the time Aisha gets back, we'll already be in the Bahamas and she'll be stuck dealing with the creditors. Tasha laughed. It was the same laugh Aisha remembered from childhood, bright, musical, carefree. Only now it sounded cruel, sharp, triumphant. Honestly, Tasha said, reaching for the bottle of red on the table and pouring herself a generous glass, I thought she'd figure it out quicker. But nah, my big sister's way too trusting. Always has been. Trust is a good thing, Malcolm said, extending his own glass so she could top it off. For us, anyway. Mr. Vance, the lawyer, Aisha realized, shifted in his seat. He adjusted his glasses again. Worry lines were etched deep around his mouth. Listen, he began, voice quieter now. I'm a legal professional. This whole scheme, it's skirting the line. More than skirting. If anything goes sideways, I could be implicated for complicity. I don't want to be dragged into this any further. Vance, chill out. Malcolm reached over and patted the man's shoulder. The same patronizing pat he used on junior architects. When they were panicking over deadlines, everything is bulletproof. The documents are perfectly clean. We got Aisha's signatures back when she signed that bundle for the bank. 6 months ago, remember? The power of attorney was tucked right in the middle. She didn't even read half the pages. A cold wave of nausea rolled through Aisha's body. 6 months ago. The night Malcolm came home with a thick stack of papers. Just routine renewal for the line of credit, babe. Sign here, initial there. You know how banks are. She had trusted him. Of course she had. He was her husband. Co-owner on paper, yes, but he always insisted, architecture is my thing. Business is yours, she had signed. My God, she whispered to the empty hotel room. How could I have been so blind? But still, Vance pressed, this is fraud. If she goes to the police, she won't, Tasha cut in confidently. My sister isn't the type to call the cops. She'll try to solve it quietly herself. Keep the family embarrassment to a minimum. And while she's thinking, we'll be long gone. Where exactly are you planning to go? Vance asked, voice thin. The Bahamas, Malcolm answered smoothly. Everything's already set up. Condo purchased through a holding company. Accounts opened. Tasha and I fly out in 1 week. By then, all the company debt will officially be shifted to Aisha. Creditors start knocking, and there'll be nothing left in the accounts to pay them with. Business is practically bankrupt anyway. We bled the assets dry months ago. Aisha sat frozen, the words sinking into her like slow poison. Her company, Prime Build Corp. 10 years of 80-hour weeks, sleepless nights bidding on projects, weekends spent on job sites in steel-toe boots and a hard hat, every dollar reinvested, every relationship nurtured, every risk calculated. Malcolm had been systematically dismantling it, and Tasha, her own sister, had helped. Jealousy had always simmered between them. Aisha knew that. Tasha envied the condo, the title CEO, the husband who seemed so steady. But this level of betrayal? It felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. She listened for another 20 minutes as they talked logistics. Flight times, wire transfers, how to liquidate the last hidden accounts once they landed. Malcolm and Tasha were giddy, finishing each other's sentences, touching hands across the table. Vance mostly listened, nodding unhappily, repeating variations of the same phrase. I'm a legal professional. I shouldn't be involved. When the feed finally showed the lawyer gathering his papers and leaving, Aisha muted the sound. Silence filled the hotel room. Her hands shook so badly she could barely navigate the app to save the recording. She downloaded it 3 times, once to the cloud with password protection, once to an encrypted USB drive in her purse, once to her phone. Triple redundancy, engineer's habit. Then she stood and walked to the window. Below, sodium streetlights painted the parking lot orange. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway. Ordinary life continuing. Inside her chest, something cold and hard was taking shape. Rage, pain, but also, strangely, clarity. They thought she was finished. They thought she was too trusting, too proud, too conflict-averse to fight back. They were wrong. Aisha returned to the bed, opened her notebook, and began to write. 1. Save and back up the recording done. 2. Research Elias Vance, Granite Law, Atlanta, Corporate Restructuring Specialist. Return to Atlanta immediately and do not warn Malcolm. 4. Do not confront yet. Gather more evidence first. 5. Contact Vance privately. He is the weak link. She stared at the list for a long moment. Tomorrow morning she would call her colleagues, invent a family emergency, rebook the earliest flight back to Atlanta. She would tell no one the real reason, especially not Malcolm. She looked back at the frozen image on her screen. 3 faces smiling, glasses raised, celebrating her destruction. Aisha closed the laptop with a soft click. You think you've won, she whispered into the dark room. The game has only just begun. Aisha landed at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport. At 6:12 a.m., the sky still dark enough that the terminal lights reflected off wet tarmac like scattered coins. She had rebooked the flight the night before, using the hotel's sluggish Wi-Fi, inventing a vague family emergency, excuse to her project manager in Oklahoma City. No details, no apologies, just a curt email and a promise to follow up once things were sorted. She didn't go home. Instead, she took a cab straight to Buckhead, to the small sublet condo Lena had offered her months ago when Lena left for a month-long Caribbean cruise. Water the ficus if you're in town, Lena had texted with a laughing emoji. Aisha had never used the keys until now. The building was quiet at that hour, the lobby smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and yesterday's coffee. She rode the elevator to the 5th floor, unlocked the door, and stepped into stale air thick with the scent of potpourri and closed windows. She dropped her roller bag by the couch, crossed to the living room window, and cracked it open. Cool morning air rushed in, carrying the distant rumble of early traffic on Peachtree Road. Safe house, she thought, at least for now. She didn't unpack. Instead, she plugged in her laptop, connected to Lena's Wi-Fi, password still, Lena Beach 2025, and opened the saved recording again. She watched the kitchen scene twice more, this time with a notebook open beside her, pen moving in tight, controlled strokes. Key facts. Elias Vance, attorney, Granite Law Associates, Midtown Atlanta. Specialty, corporate restructuring, mergers, transactions. Repeated phrase, I'm a legal professional. I shouldn't be involved. Visible fear, trembling hands, frequent glass adjustments, refusal to look directly at Mal or Tasha for long. Malcolm and Tasha's confidence, laughing, touching glasses, planning beach life. Timeline, 1 week until departure, now 6 days. Destination, Bahamas condo in holding company name. Assets already drained via shell companies. Debt shifted personally to Aisha via fraudulent bylaw amendments. She underlined the last line twice. Next, she opened a browser tab and typed, Elias Vance, attorney, Atlanta Granite Law. The firm's website loaded first, clean, corporate, blue and gray, stock photos of smiling people shaking hands. Vance's profile was near the bottom of the Our Team page. Headshot, same wire-rimmed glasses, same careful smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emory Law School, 10 years in practice, focus on complex corporate transactions and liability restructuring. No personal social media linked, no wedding ring visible in the photo. She cross-referenced on LinkedIn, sparse activity. Last post, a repost of an American Bar Association article on fiduciary duties, dated 14 months ago. Connections, 312, mostly other attorneys, a few accountants. No obvious overlap with Malcolm's architecture firm. Careful, she thought. Or paranoid. She needed more. She texted Kat Shawaloff, an old college friend who now did in-house counsel for a mid-sized logistics company. Kat had always been the one who knew everyone's dirt, without ever seeming to gossip. Aisha, hey, quick question. Ever heard of Granite Law or Elias Vance? Corporate guy in Midtown. The reply came within 3 minutes. Kat was an early riser. Kat, Granite? Yeah, mid-tier firm. Decent rep, but they play in gray areas sometimes, restructuring deals that smell a little off. Vance is their go-to for liability shifting stuff. Quiet, smart, keeps his head down. Why? Aisha. Just curious. Friend mentioned him for some advice. If it's anything spicy, be careful. He's not flashy, but he's thorough. And thorough lawyers in gray area firms usually know exactly what they're signing. Aisha, thanks. "Oh, you coffee." She set the phone down and rubbed her eyes. Thorough. That matched the man. On the recording, nervous, but precise. He hadn't drafted sloppy documents. He'd made them look legal. Bulletproof, Malcolm had called them, which meant the weak point wasn't the documents themselves. It was the man who had drafted them. She spent the next 2 days in Lena's condo like a ghost. She ordered takeout, kept lights low, avoided windows during daylight hours in case anyone was watching the building. Paranoia. Perhaps, but useful. She pulled every company document she could access digitally. Bank statements, loan agreements, asset sale contracts, board resolutions. She cross-referenced dates and signatures. Malcolm had been clever. Most transfers were routed through 3 layers of LLCs, each registered in Delaware or Wyoming, each with nominee directors. But the money trail always looped back to 2 offshore accounts, one in Nassau, one in Grand Cayman. The final beneficiary, a trust whose trustee was listed as T. Wilson. Tasha. Aisha felt the rage rise again, hot and bright behind her eyes, but she forced it down. Rage made people sloppy. She needed cold precision now. On the 3rd morning, she decided it was time to move. She needed to meet Vance face to face, unexpectedly, in a place where he felt safe enough to talk, but surprised enough to slip. Kat had mentioned, after some gentle prodding, that Vance ate lunch almost every day at a small cafe called French Press, 2 blocks from the Granite Law Office. Creature of habit, Kat said. Same table by the window if he can get it. Thursday, 12:45 p.m., Aisha walked into French Press wearing a simple navy blazer, white blouse, dark jeans, professional but unremarkable. Hair in a low bun, no makeup beyond concealer to hide the shadows under her eyes. She carried a leather messenger bag and a phone with the recording, already cued. The cafe smelled of fresh ground coffee and warm croissants. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Vance was exactly where Kat said he would be. Corner table, window seat, tablet open. Untouched cappuccino, cooling beside a half-eaten Caesar salad. He looked worse than on the recording. Deeper lines around the mouth, eyes slightly bloodshot. He hadn't slept well recently. Good. Aisha ordered a black coffee at the counter, paid cash, and chose a table diagonally across from him. Close enough to observe, far enough to seem incidental. She opened her own laptop, pretended to type emails, but kept him in her peripheral vision. His hand trembled when he lifted the cup. Twice he checked his phone, thumb hovering over the screen as though expecting a call he didn't want. He never looked around. He was trying very hard to look normal. At 1:10, she stood, shouldered her bag, and walked toward the exit, slowly, deliberately. As she passed his table, she let her hip brush the edge, just enough to knock his open folder to the floor. Papers fanned out. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry," she said, bending immediately to gather them. "I'm clumsy today." Vance startled, then reached down to help. Their hands brushed on a stapled document. "No harm done," he said automatically, voice flat. Aisha handed him the stack, meeting his eyes for the first time. She let recognition flicker, just a second, then widened her eyes as though surprised. "Wait, I think I know you. Granite Law, right? Corporate?" Vance stiffened. His gaze sharpened. "I work there. Why?" She sat in the chair opposite him without asking permission. Casual, but not aggressive. "This is going to sound strange, but I was actually hoping to run into someone from your firm. I'm in a bind. Business partner trying to drain assets, shift debt onto me personally. I was told you're the guy for complicated restructurings." His face paled by degrees. He pushed his salad away. "Who told you that?" "A colleague. Said you handle difficult situations." Vance stared at her for a long beat, calculating. Then, "I'm afraid I'm not taking new clients right now." "I understand." Aisha nodded, voice gentle. "It's just urgent. My partners already move money through shells. I think the documents were prepared by someone who maybe didn't realize how far it would go. Or maybe he did. Either way, I need to know how deep the damage is before creditors start calling." At the word shells, Vance's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the door, escape route, then back at her. "Give me the short version," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Aisha gave it, carefully edited, but every detail a mirror of her own situation. Power of attorney abused, signatures slipped into routine packets, bylaws amended to pierce the corporate veil, assets sold below market to controlled entities, debt piled high in her name. She spoke quietly, clinically, watching his face drain of color with every sentence. When she finished, she leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to threaten you, Mr. Vance. I just want the truth. And maybe a way to fix this before it's too late." He stared at the table. His hands were clenched so tightly the knuckles showed white. "How did you find me?" he asked at last. "I didn't," she lied smoothly. "I came here for coffee and saw you through the window. Recognized you from the firm website, Serendipity." He didn't believe her. But he didn't stand up and leave either. After a long silence, he spoke again, voice cracking on the first word. "I never wanted this." Aisha waited. "They came to me 2 months ago," he continued, barely audible over the cafe noise. "Malcolm said it was a routine restructuring. I drafted amendments, prepared transfer documents. Then Tasha appeared. They explained the real goal. I told them it was fraud. They said I was already in too deep, signed interim papers, accepted a retainer. If I walked away, they'd claim I breached confidentiality, sue me, ruin my reputation. And the money?" He swallowed. "I have debts, mortgage, credit cards. I told myself no one would get hurt, that you'd never know until it was too late." Aisha felt something cold coil in her stomach, but she kept her face neutral. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now I can't sleep. I keep waiting for the knock on the door. I know they'll pin it all on me if it unravels. The lawyer who drafted the dirty documents. I'm the perfect fall guy." Aisha reached into her bag and placed her phone face up on the table. She tapped play. The kitchen audio filled the small space between them. Malcolm satisfied, "Excellent." Tasha's cruel laugh. Vance's own voice repeating, "I'm a legal professional." Vance went gray, sweat beaded on his upper lip. "I recorded it," Aisha said quietly. "Everything. I'm not going to the police yet. I want your help first. Tell me exactly what you did, where the money is, how the documents work. Help me reverse it, or at least block their escape, and I'll make sure the DA knows. You cooperated from the beginning. Full witness statement. Plea for leniency. Probation at worst." He stared at the frozen image of his own face on her screen. "If I say no? Then I walk out of here and go straight to the Fulton County DA with this recording. The documents I've already pulled, and your name at the top of the witness list. You'll be charged right alongside them. Complicity in felony fraud. You'll lose your license, probably face prison. They won't protect you. You know that." Vance closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Resignation, maybe even relief. "I need time to think," he said. "You have 24 hours. Same table, same time tomorrow. If you're not here, I assume the answer is no." She stood, collected her bag, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the spring air felt sharp against her skin. She walked 3 blocks before allowing herself to lean against a brick wall and breathe. Her knees were shaking, but she had made contact. The hunter had just made the first real move. The morning Aisha left, Lena's sublet condo for the last time felt like stepping out of a chrysalis. She hadn't realized she'd been trapped inside. She carried only her laptop bag, a small duffel of clothes, and the encrypted USB drive containing every piece of evidence she and Elias Vance had compiled over the previous, frantic 72 hours. The rest of her belongings could wait or be replaced. Some things were better left behind. She met Vance at 8:45 a.m. outside the Fulton County District. Attorney's office downtown. He was already there, standing rigid beside a concrete planter, a thick manila folder clutched against his chest like a shield. His suit was pressed, but his eyes were hollow. He looked like a man who had spent the night arguing with his own reflection. "You're sure?" he asked when she reached him. Aisha met his gaze without blinking. "I've never been more sure of anything." They walked inside together. The detective who took their statement was named Ramirez, mid-40s. Salt and pepper hair, the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had seen every variety of human betrayal and still managed to show up for work each day. He listened without interrupting as Aisha recounted the story from beginning to end. The business trip, the camera among the orchids, the overheard conversation, the forged signatures, the drained accounts, the Bahamas tickets. When she reached the part about her own sister, her voice cracked once, only once, but she steadied it and kept going. Vance spoke next. His voice was low, almost mechanical at first, but it gained strength as he laid out the folder's contents. Draft resolutions, amended bylaws, wire transfer logs, email chains between him and Malcolm, scanned copies of the power of attorney documents. Malcolm had slipped into the original bank packet 6 months earlier. At the bottom was a printed confession. Vance had typed and signed it, 3:17 a.m. that morning. "I was retained under false pretenses," he said. "When I realized the true intent, I should have withdrawn immediately. I didn't. I accepted additional payments. I prepared instruments I knew would be used to commit fraud. I am prepared to testify fully and truthfully in exchange for Consideration of my cooperation. Ramirez flipped through the pages slowly, expression unreadable. When he reached the still image Aisha had printed from the kitchen, recording Malcolm and Tasha, raising glasses in toast, he paused. "This is strong," he said finally. "Very strong. We'll need to move fast if they're flying out this afternoon." He picked up the desk phone. "I need supervisor clearance for immediate arrest warrants. 2 subjects, felony fraud, conspiracy, possible flight risk. Bahamas tickets confirmed. Yes, send a team to the residence now." Aisha and Vance waited in a small conference room. Neither spoke. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:30. Then 9:45. At 10:12, Ramirez returned. "Warrants approved? We're rolling to your condo now. You'll ride with us to make positive identification and point out any physical evidence." The drive felt surreal. Aisha sat in the back of an unmarked sedan watching. Familiar streets slide past. Peachtree, then Piedmont, then the turn onto their building's block. She had lived here 5 years. Walked this sidewalk holding Malcolm's hand. Now she was returning with 2 detectives and a uniformed officer to watch her. Husband and sister led away in cuffs. They parked 2 buildings down to avoid alerting anyone watching from windows. Ramirez gave quiet instructions over the radio. A second team would cover the rear exit. Aisha handed over her keys. The elevator ride up was silent, except for the soft ding of each floor. When the doors opened on 7, Aisha led them down the hallway. Her hand didn't shake when she inserted the key. She turned the knob and stepped inside. Malcolm's packed suitcase stood in the foyer like a sentinel. Voices, low, laughing, came from the master bedroom. Tasha's laugh, unmistakable. "Atlanta PD," Ramirez called, stepping forward with his badge raised. "Malcolm Thorne, Tasha Wilson, show yourselves." They appeared in the doorway together. Malcolm in jeans and a polo, phone still in hand. Tasha behind him, mid-sentence, smile frozen on her face. Aisha stood slightly to the side, arms folded, expression calm. Malcolm's eyes locked on hers first. "Aisha?" Ramirez began reading the Miranda rights. Malcolm's face drained of color with every word. Tasha looked from the detectives to Aisha, eyes widening in slow dawning horror. "You?" Malcolm whispered when Ramirez finished. "You did this?" "Yes," Aisha said simply. "I did." "How?" "The orchids," she answered. "Remember I asked you to water them? You never did, but the camera hidden among them did its job." Malcolm's knees seemed to buckle for a second. Tasha clutched at his arm. "Aisha, please," Tasha said, voice breaking. "I'm your sister. You wouldn't really—" "You stopped being my sister the moment you sat at that table planning to destroy everything I built." Malcolm tried to step forward. An officer moved between them. "We can explain," Malcolm started. "You'll explain to the DA," Aisha cut in. "Not to me?" Tasha began to cry, soft, hiccuping sobs. Malcolm's jaw worked soundlessly. The officers moved in, cuffs clicking. As they were led past her, Malcolm turned his head one last time. "I loved you," he said. Aisha looked straight through him. "You loved what I could give you." The door closed behind them. Aisha remained in the condo with Ramirez and a crime scene technician. She opened the study safe, handed over folders of original contracts. The company seal, backup drives. She showed them exactly where Malcolm kept his second phone. The one she had never been allowed to touch. Every movement was mechanical, precise. She felt nothing in the moment. The feeling would come later. When the last officer left, she locked the door behind them and sank onto the living room sofa. Then the tears came. Not quiet tears. Great, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the marriage she thought was real. For the sister she had protected since childhood. For the company she had poured 10 years into. For the trust she had given so freely and lost so completely. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes burned. Then she stood, washed her face, drank a glass of water, and began packing Malcolm's things into boxes. She labeled them neatly. They could sit in storage until he was released, or until she decided what to do with them. The next weeks blurred. Prime Build Corp. Entered voluntary bankruptcy. Aisha worked with Denise and a court-appointed trustee to liquidate remaining assets, pay employees their final checks with severance where possible, and notify creditors. The drained funds were partially frozen thanks to Vance's detailed money trail maps. Court orders would eventually claw back what they could. It wouldn't save the company, but it would reduce the personal liability. Malcolm and Tasha had tried to saddle her with, she sold the condo furnished. Too many ghosts lived in the walls. She found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur. Quiet street, good light, small balcony where she could eventually grow new orchids. "Real ones this time," No cameras. Malcolm and Tasha were denied bail. The judge cited flight risk and the severity of the charges. They would remain in custody until trial. Vance continued cooperating. His testimony, combined with the recording and the documents, made the prosecution's case airtight. In exchange, the DA's office recommended probation and a fine. The State Bar, however, was less forgiving. They voted to disbar him. 10 years of practice erased in a single disciplinary hearing. Aisha attended the sentencing 6 months later. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, smelling faintly of wax and old paper. Malcolm sat stone-faced in an orange jumpsuit. Tasha kept her head down, shoulders shaking. Vance sat in the gallery, suit too big now, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge read the verdict in a flat, careful voice. Malcolm Oliver Thorne, guilty of felony fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft by taking, sentenced to 8 years in the custody of the Department of Corrections. Tasha Serena Wilson, guilty on all counts, 7 years. Both ordered to pay full restitution. Both barred from holding any executive or fiduciary position for 5 years following release. Vance received 3 years probation. The bar's disbarment stood. When court adjourned, Aisha walked out without looking at either of them. Outside, November wind cut through her coat. She pulled it tighter and started walking toward the MARTA station. Halfway there, her phone buzzed. "Vance," she answered. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "Still breathing," she said. "You?" "Trying to figure out what comes next. Paralegal work, maybe. Something behind the scenes. No more spotlights. You'll find your way," she told him. "You already started." A long pause. "Aisha, thank you for giving me the chance to make it right." "You made the choice," she replied. "That's what matters." They hung up. 2 months later, Aisha opened Dream Space Studio, interior design, small scale, personal touch. She hired Polly, a recent SCAD graduate with fearless color sense, and Kyle, a project manager who could charm paint suppliers into next-day delivery. The office was tiny, 2 rooms above a bookstore near Inman Park, exposed brick, good light, plants on every surface. The first projects came slowly, word of mouth. A few Instagram posts, but they came. A cozy reading nook for a retired teacher, a modern kitchen for young parents, a restaurant redesign that required late nights and endless mock-ups. Each finished space felt like reclaiming a small piece of herself. Vance began stopping by once a week. At first it was strictly business, reviewing vendor contracts, spotting hidden liability clauses. Then it became tea after hours, then walks in Piedmont Park on weekends, then dinners, then evenings on her balcony watching fireflies.